Well, I've got some good news for you guys. Fantastic Four First Steps is the first movie of 2025 to significantly exceed my very low expectations. It only took until July, but who would have thought it would have been this movie? I absolutely said in my Superman review that Fantastic Four would not be the savior of superhero movies. In fact, I said we all know how it's going to turn out. And I'll never be afraid to admit when I'm wrong, and I was very wrong when I said that. Insider reports indicated that the movie screened really badly with test audiences, and the movie was just plagued with the same issues that MCU movies have been plagued with for the last 5 years, and like with Brave New World, it sounded like there were some spontaneous reshoots. There was also talk about like a bunch of different actors being offered the role of Reed Richards, and they all turned it down except for Pedro Pascal. So just a lot of red flags going into this movie. It's kind of hard to tell which things are true and which aren't, but I'm inclined to believe that there were some reshoots with this movie, and if so, they absolutely worked. For a second, and even still now up to this moment, I do have a tiny bit of faith moving forward with a little bit of cautious curiosity for what the MCU has coming. But then I turn my brain on and I realize that the setting for this movie is completely fresh. It's isolated from Earth 616, which is the main MCU timeline, and it just kind of makes me wish that they would reboot the MCU now instead of later. I will be talking spoilers in this review, so if you want my final verdict spoiler free, skip to this time in the video. The movie definitely isn't perfect by any stretch. It can be a bit bland at times. There's not as much narrative depth, and we don't get as close with Reed, Sue, Johnny, and Ben as we needed to, but you can definitely tell they put some heart into this movie. We get a slightly railroaded but mostly decent prologue of context for this group. The only thing I hated was that they were basically just like, yeah, they went to space, DNA got all fucked up, and now they're superheroes. But otherwise, they did a really good job showing how tightly knit the Fantastic Four is with the general public and just how much the general public relies on these heroes. Everything is fine, the world is peaceful until Silver Surfer descends from outer space and conveniently warns everyone that Galactus is just gonna straight up eat the planet. And you know, it might not actually be as convenient as I'm making it seem. It could just be more like she's being cocky, like she thinks that Galactus is totally unmatched, or she's just basically trying to say like, you know, you're gonna fucking die, so maybe now would be a good time to shoot your shot with that one girl that you never went out with, or make amends with your father, or something like that. So the Fantastic Four go on a mission to confront Galactus, and on this mission, Sue gives birth to her and Reed's baby, and when they come face to face with Galactus, who's this huge cosmic entity, he senses great power in the child and basically makes them a deal that if they give up the child, he'll spare their world, but if not, he'll just still eat their world. Obviously, they choose not to give up their baby, but it just makes for a really incredible moral dilemma for these characters to wrestle with throughout the movie, like, do they give up their baby that it took them years to conceive for the sake of humanity? And I can't really say I would have done different in that situation. It sounds very familiar, actually. So instead, they devise a plan to use these massive teleportation towers to transport Galactus far away where he can never find Earth. But the problem is that they need to use the child to lure him in. The child gets Galactus's attention, but it isn't quite enough to get him to fully fall into the Fantastic Four's trap. So Sue has to use all of her superhuman stamina to basically push him into the trap using her force field abilities. She almost dies, which I actually like because then it feels like there's actual consequences to having such insane levels of power, unlike other stories here. But anyways, because their child is also super powerful, when Reed lays the child on her chest, she comes back to life. The only thing I don't like about this is that it sort of negates the consequences that I was just talking about, but at least we had that moment. I also just hope that they don't make the child into like a god. I don't really know the comic lore at all, but after Thunderbolts and Ant-Man 3, I just really don't want to see it anymore unless it's for like an Avengers movie like it should be. And side note, they don't ever really explain why this child is so powerful, like at all. Overall, it was a story that somewhat lacked the adventurous element that a lot of Phase 3 MCU movies had, but there was still a lot of variety in the plot points, and if I had to describe the experience in one word, I would say probably cohesive. The story wasn't generic, but it was very straightforward. It felt very, very focused, like they didn't spend way too much time on empty references and all that sort of stuff. It was well paced overall. It was constantly on track and consistent in its rising tension. and it just made for a movie that was very memorable but didn't ask too much of the audience in return. I do wish the pawn was a little bit deeper in certain areas, but to be genuinely honest, it really did feel like I was watching a Phase 3 MCU movie. Pedro Pascal was not mediocre as Reed Richards. He's got sort of that Peter Parker nerdiness to him, and I really like that, and I think they just did good by his character. The only thing I don't like about Reed Richards in general is that he's like the leader of the group, but he has like the weakest abilities out of everyone. Sue Storm is exactly what I want to see in a strong female character. I don't want to see a woman sweating her tits off just to seem like a man. I want to see a feminine woman with humble wisdom to her captivation instead of just Mary Sue girl boss shit. There's a scene where Reed is just an idiot and tells the entire world what's coming and that the Fantastic Four basically just doomed everyone. And then in another scene, Sue Storm steps up to offer reassurance of their commitment to the world. And at first I was thinking like, here we go with the Mary Sue cleaning up after the chat and all that. But then she says, and I quote, "I would not sacrifice my child for this world, but I would not sacrifice this world for my child." For such a simplistic piece of dialogue, it actually really resonated with me, and then it didn't feel as much like she was cleaning up after him. It felt like she was just being a loving wife and speaking for him in support of the entire group. Not to mention that the editing of that scene and the music that's playing really tops it all off. And that was something else I love. The way this movie is so pro-family. It really preaches traditional family values like loyalty, support, and accountability. Johnny Storm, also a great character. He's usually like the goofball of the group, and he really is in this movie too, but they actually allow him to have some serious influence in the plot. Again, they absolutely did right by his character. Ben Grimm was probably the least memorable of the entire crew, but he did have his own influence in the plot, and he was a charming personality. I also thought his character design was very well crafted. So just a great cast of characters with a really nice team dynamic. Galactus, for a villain with such shallow development, was actually really good in this movie. Ralph Ineson is always a great villain, and the thing I loved most about Galactus in this movie was his persistence. Just when you thought that the Fantastic Four had him, they absolutely don't, and when he fights back, it genuinely intimidates you. Silver Surfer was a real treat in this movie. She is a gender swap, but it is absolutely justified. You can totally sell me on a good gender swapped character, and I actually think that her being a girl made the whole "your planet is marked for death" so much more eerie. Not only that, but we get actual chemistry between her and Johnny Storm, like genuine young adult, sort of star-crossed lover style romance, even though sadly we don't get to see it through. Who knows, she might not actually be dead, but Marvel, if you're listening, this is what we want to see more of. Stop catering to like all the internet normies and the woke audience. Start catering to real life normies like me. As far as politics go, there's really not much to say about this movie. There's like one plot point where Sue convinces all the world leaders to disband their armed forces, which is very in character for people who think that at their roots, all cultures are the same and we all want the same thing, which is just a pipe dream. I don't know if this is something that happens in the comics or anything, but on screen, this is just something that I refuse to believe could ever happen in the real world. Also, the climax is a little weird when they're all fighting Galactus. The sudden shift in focus from the entire group to Sue Storm as she takes the spotlight is a little bit suspicious, a little bit girl boss, but not too bad all things considered. There's also subtle box checking. They show a lesbian couple at one point. It's kind of easy to miss if you're not paying attention, but whatever. Dude, otherwise, Fantastic Four First Steps is a solid movie, and for my final verdict, I'll be ruling in favor of this movie at 75%, making it, I think, my fourth highest rated movie to date. And I'm not like a huge Fantastic Four fan, but I kind of am now. I just hope it's not going to be a one-off success, and then as soon as they go to Earth 616, it gets like all messed up, but we'll see, I guess. This one was definitely a fun watch. I would highly recommend you go see this in theaters. I'm probably going to go see it again with my girlfriend. Anyways, that's all I got for this week. If you enjoyed my review, please consider dropping a like and hitting subscribe, but that's all for this case. This court is adjourned.